Well, I think we'll probably all agree that connections are very important. Connections are very important. The things that we use, we probably want them to be connected properly. I think we'll probably all agree that one of the most frustrating things that each of us has to do every year is hang Christmas lights. It can be a little frustrating to make sure that they're working properly and that they're hanging correctly. And those of us who are maybe a little older maybe remember the days that if one bulb was not connected right, the entire strand did not work. How many of you remember those days? Drove us nuts, especially after the lights were on the tree, right? You know, just one bulb not connected right could make the entire string not work or function. Similarly, in the modern era of our technology, we have a lot of cords and wires running everywhere. Here in the church, I am relatively convinced with all of the technology that we have added, if we took out all of the wires and cords, we'd be able to run it from here to California and back and have a little left over. And I know how challenging it is for us when some of the technology does not work properly, because someone has to start going wire by wire and cord by cord to make sure everything is connected exactly the way it's supposed to be. Connections are important. Personally, connections are very important as well. You know, if we want a reservation at a very popular restaurant, maybe on a popular evening, a connection to the maitre d' might not be a bad thing that day to be able to make a well-placed phone call to get that reservation. And now that it appears that attending athletic events will be once again legal, and we may even have professional Major League Baseball in Buffalo. The Blue Jays come here to play. Seats will be limited. We might need a few connections, right? If we want to get a seat at some of these sporting events. And really on the more personal level, connections are very important. Our connections as family. We know how strained they have been during the time of the pandemic. It was very stressful, I think, for us all. And we were not able to see our loved ones like we normally would, interact with them personally. Of course, we aided that with Zoom or, other means of communication, text messages, phone calls, and so on. But now that we're able to see one another again a little bit more as we're getting more and more vaccinated, we are reconnecting, and how joyful that is. And for some, those who are really close to, maybe we reconnect instantly, like a good close friend. Years could pass by, but you pick up right where you left off, huh? And maybe some who are a little more distant, it's a little strained at first, but we get there. And of course, there are some individuals in our life that we are disconnected from. People maybe have hurt us or we've hurt them, and there's an estrangement. And when we see those individuals, it can be a very difficult time, because we are so disconnected from them. We may not trust each other as we once did. Well, simple question, how connected are you to Christ? How connected are you to Jesus Christ? Today's readings are really all about being connected. And not only connection, but connection that leads to action. All of the readings remind us that we need to be connected to Christ. And it's not enough to say we're connected, our action has to also show that connection. In the first reading, we hear about Saul. Of course, Saul was completely disconnected. Saul was at great odds with the Christian community. He was putting the Christians to death. The Christians were afraid of him. But Saul goes through that conversion, becomes Paul, and what is it that we hear? They're not really ready to trust him yet. Barnabas had to intercede on his behalf. And when we hear that they saw his action, his powerful preaching, then they started to see him as trustworthy. And they saw that he was now grafted to the vine of Christ. He was part of the body of Christ. His connection to Christ leading to bold preaching action. Second reading, St. John 2, is very clear to remind us to be really connected with Christ in love. Is not just about words, but it's about deed, action, and the truth. John is reminding us that we have to be rooted in the truth of Christ and allow that truth to be put into action. Verbally saying we believe isn't enough. And of course, the gospel, very familiar story to us. Jesus, the true vine, we are the branches. God the Father, the vine grower. Of course, we're reminded that if, as branches, we are connected to Christ, we'll bear good fruit. Beautiful image. And we're also really reminded that if someone simply claims, to be connected to Christ, but they do not act in the truth or in love, well, then their fruit will not be very good. And certainly we see that in the world. Even in our own church, the troubles we've had in the last few years, we see it in civic circles, we see it among some elected officials that at times things come out where we see that they are not really connected. They are not really abiding in the truth. They are really not living in love, and eventually the fruit that they bear, not very good, and causes great harm. Jesus, as the vine grower, really has tremendous meaning for us, very deep-rooted meaning calling us to act. Again, for Paul, it was his actions of the powerful preaching that led to the trustworthiness. For John, we're reminded, it's not just enough to say we love someone. Love is not just an emotion or feeling, but it's that decision backed up by action, rooted in the truth. And so too for you and for me. Our actions need to be rooted in that truth, need to be rooted in that love, to be that good fruit coming forth from the vine of Christ. When we're attached to Christ, we bear good fruit. Well, what does every good branch need? First of all, I am not a gardener in any way, shape, or form. My mother was a master gardener. I did not inherit that skill. I am able to kill silk plants. And gardening and I do not get along. However, what I do know that this time of year especially, we got to go out and prune, right? And the good rose bushes, even those good branches, we got to prune them, we got to trim. Why? Because that good, strong branch will grow even stronger and will bear even greater fruit, meaning buds and flowers. So what does every good branch really need? It needs to be pruned. So it continues to be good and even grows stronger and better. And so just as we know that about the garden, that's really the same truth for us as the branches of Christ. We need to be pruned on a regular basis in order to be healthy, strong branches for Christ. So to be a good disciple means we need to be pruned, we need to be cleansed. I assume we're all good branches. You wouldn't be here if you weren't. You're a good branch. But why do you come here every Sunday? Why do all of us gather in prayer and sacrament? For that fertilizer, that nourishment that we need in the sacrament. We come here really to be pruned, that hopefully something we hear in the scripture each week and hopefully also in the homily, that something is going to hit us and maybe, prune us a little, say, I need to think about that. This is an area of challenge and growth for me. Well, how else are we really pruned? I think we're also pruned by enduring hardship and trial, burdens, challenges, problems. These ways are ways that we are also pruned and we can become closer to Christ. Through the hardships that we can become closer to Jesus Christ. I like a very good glass of hearty Cabernet, preferably from Napa or Sonoma. And I know absolutely nothing about growing grapes. Absolutely nothing. But what I really do know is that the best wines, as I've studied them a little, the best wines come from the vines that have endured hardship, harsh seasons. They've been able to survive. The best grapes come from them. And grapes need a lot of sunshine. If the grapes and the vine are going to be in constant cloudy, gloomy weather with a lot of moisture, not going to produce the best grapes. A lot of sunshine in order for that grape to mature, to produce the best fruit. Well, if you think about that, we are very much the same way. We need the Son of God, Jesus, to be part of our daily life, especially in those moments of difficulty and hardship, in order to produce the fruit. I think for many of us, myself included, when hardship comes or problem comes, we have this idea in our head that, well, if I really am faithful to Christ to the best of my ability, nothing bad is ever supposed to happen to us. God with his big hand is supposed to stop every challenging moment that we might have to endure. It's a human thought. I think we all have it at times. But we eventually do experience that pruning and that hardship and suffering. And as we wonder why, maybe the simple question to ask, do we see the moments of pruning as some type of a punishment from God, or that the Lord doesn't care? Or rather, can we see that pruning is really the invitation to grow stronger in the midst of adversity? That the moment of pruning and time of adversity can really call us to a greater humility, can call us to a greater ability to forgive, can call us to a deeper understanding and practice of mercy, and a reliance, complete reliance upon God every moment of our life. I'm going to guess over the years together I shared with you about Josephine, one of my old communion calls from another parish. She was a wonderful woman, and I'm quite certain with the Lord in heaven. Josephine, in her later 80s, was no longer able to come to Mass. She was a daily Mass goer, and so I would take communion to her house. She only lived a couple doors away. And I remember one of the visits I had with her in her home. She shared the story of her life. And she began by saying when she was a little girl, she went to Catholic school and she went to Mass every day. I even remember that. It was kind of like homeroom, 8 o'clock Mass. That's where Sister took attendance. And she said when she went on to high school, she also went to daily Mass. And she said as a young woman, she went to work, and she would go to Mass on her way to work. And she said often I'd stop at the church on my way home from work to pray. Of course, in those days, all churches were really open all of the time. And she said, then I got married. And I believe she had 5 children, if I remember right. And it became busy raising the kids. She said, and also, at the same time, my in-laws became ill and they moved in with us. I had to take care of them. And she said, and not that long after that, my own parents became ill and moved in with us too. And so I was raising the children and taking care of my parents and my in-laws. And she said I was lucky if I could stop and pray a Hail Mary and an Our Father through the day. She said, but I always did. I didn't miss a day of prayer. She said to me, now I'm old and I can't even leave the house. She told me she prayed the rosary 15 times a day, 15 rosaries a day. And she had and showed me her prayer book, which was disintegrating, the kind of prayer book you want to see, a well-used one. And she pulled out these 3x5 cards that were also somewhat disintegrating with the names of everybody she promised to remember in prayer on these rosaries. And she said, I pray the rosary, I watch Mass on television. She said, I also hope God will forgive me because I also watch wrestling on pay-per-view. I told her I think the Lord would cut her a break, on that. What did Josephine teach me? That she was always firmly attached as a branch to the vine of Christ. Throughout the course of her life, she maybe had more time and sometimes maybe less time, but always rooted in prayer, that greatest nutrient fertilizer for her life. And she saw all of the moments of adversity, all of those challenges, not as burdens or the Lord abandoning her, but rather as that opportunity to grow in service, humility, forgiveness, mercy, to grow in that complete reliance on the Lord. And so maybe this Sunday we just simply question, how connected are we to God as one of his branches here in the world today? Can we see that love requires deed and action and truth? That love cannot just simply be a word devoid of action and truth. And can we really look at those moments of our own pruning and rather than question why, embrace them as an opportunity to grow in those graces of humility, forgiveness, service, mercy, and reliance completely on the Lord?